Jigsaw backstory together in chronological order. You'll never see it in a single film in chronological order.
I'd actually like to see somebody do that. I bet you somebody has done that, or soon will. YouTube.
What you're about to see is a multi-year-long attempt to compile the events that take place in the Saw franchise into a linear, cohesive, chronological timeline. If you're knowledgeable about the plot and production history of Saw, you know this task isn't quite as simple as it might initially appear. I made the bulk of this before Saw 10 came out, but don't worry, I do also talk about Saw 10 at the end. We have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to ease you in with a quick basic recap of Saw's production history. James Wan and Leigh Whannell put together a proof-of-concept short, often referred to by fans as Saw 0.5, to secure funding and pave the way for the pair to release the first Saw film in October 2004. While the franchise is today known for its elaborate traps and torture-porn elements, the first Saw was comparatively restrained. The main game and Amanda's trap are the only ones really shown in full, so the main guts of the film are about Adam and Dr. Gordon finding out more about each other and why they've been placed in this game. It was a mystery thriller and not a film built for sequels. The mystery of the film was finding out who was doing this and why. Both of those questions are answered by the end. But they've just made the most profitable horror movie since Scream. The pressure to make a sequel was massive.
The film came out on a Friday, and by Monday the sequel was announced. So yes, it's going ahead.
They had to come up with a script and fully shoot this film in time for next year's Halloween. Around this time, a young filmmaker called Darren Lynn Bousman was looking to sell his first script. The screenplay, titled The Desperate, was noted to be pretty similar in concept to Saw. So much so they ended up using this script as a starting point for the Saw 2 script, and they brought Bousman on as director.
And he pitched me the movie. And as he's finished pitching the movie, I kind of thought about it, and I said to him, I said, that's Saw 2.
And I was quiet for a minute, I go, oh my God, you're right.
They rewrote, shot, and released it in time for Halloween 2005, and it was another big success. Saw 2 had upped the stakes from the first, where instead of having 2 people chained in a room, it was 8 people free to roam a whole house. It makes sense from an escalation of concept standpoint, but was overall pretty clunky. This is the only time a game of this exact format will take place. Jigsaw's kind of similar, but not quite. While Saw 2 had redefined the franchise from mystery thriller to torture porn horror, the series hadn't quite found its footing yet, and as such, 2 ends up being one of the weakest in the franchise in my opinion. One of the important shifts it made though was a heavier focus on John Kramer's character and personality. Despite barely featuring in the first film, it was evident that Tobin Bell's performance was to become a massive part of the allure of the franchise. It also established the first instance of a Jigsaw accomplice, which will become an extremely important element in this franchise going forward. Leigh, Wan, and Bousman were initially not interested in doing a third film, but after hearing about the death of Greg Hoffman, producer of the other 2 films, they all met up and they agreed to make one more film in honor of him, and they even named a new detective character after him. They aimed to make it a more emotional script, so this film wrapped up the trilogy with the ultimate death of the Jigsaw killer, as well as his accomplice Amanda. I'm sectioning off this trilogy here, not just because it's the last one that Leigh and James wrote on, but because I think to fully understand the Saw franchise, you need to understand the various voices that went into creating each film. So this is the Wan-Whannell trilogy, followed by the Melton-Dunstan tetralogy. Though I actually like to think of it as a trilogy followed by 2 duologies, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Moving on to Saw 4, Saw 4 redefined the series in a way that I consider even more significant than the Saw 2 redefining. As I said, there's a new writing team on this time. It doubles down on the trial format of Saw 3 and cements that as the standard format for most future Saw films. But more significantly, it expanded their willingness to mess around with a non-linear narrative. Saw 2 had dabbled in this, but Saw 4 really ramped it up. Jigsaw's dead. Or is he? Yes, he is, but how is he making more traps? Well, Saw 4 doesn't take place after Saw 3. It also doesn't take place before Saw 3. Saw 4 is concurrent with Saw 3, taking place at exactly the same time. The plots are parallel and end around the same spot, so from this point on, you'd need to find evidence to place a scene on a timeline, because otherwise it could theoretically be anywhere. Saw 4 also established their willingness to bring back characters that hadn't been 100% confirmed dead. Saw 2 had ended with Eric Matthews being chained to a pipe and left to die, and even though he doesn't make it very far in Saw 4, his reappearance set an important precedent that will be reinforced in the coming films. If you don't see them die, they're not dead. Saw 4 also introduces the very significant characters of Special Agents Strahm and Perez, and the increased role of Detective Hoffman, revealing him to be another Jigsaw accomplice at the end. Saw 5 alters the trap format slightly, but overall keeps a similar structure to 3 and 4, a game with multiple people moving through one room at a time and facing traps, intercut with police drama. Saw 5 is a little different in the sense that the main game and the police drama are nearly completely disconnected with pretty much no bearing on each other. You could watch Saw 5 with the main game scenes cut out and it wouldn't really affect the plot at all. The main entertainment of the movie now comes from the adjacent cop drama. You have Hoffman trying to hide his secret identity and Agent Strahm desperately trying to catch him slipping up. The focus has kind of shifted into this like soap opera horror tone. And this is what really made me fall in love with this franchise. This one also has a lot more flashbacks because we need more Tobin Bell. Even though Jigsaw died 2 movies ago, Saw 5 refuses to move on from Tobin Bell, and they are extremely right to do so. Tobin Bell had become a horror icon and is the beating heart of these movies. Despite how wacky they end up getting, his performance stays so intense and sincere. Even though they have the opportunity to just pass the torch on to Hoffman, they keep Tobin Bell very involved through the use of these flashbacks. So I'm sectioning off this duology here, and I'll explain why. While the same writers for 4 and 5 continue to write for 6 and 7, there is another slight shift in tone, and it may be down to director. Saw 1 was directed by James Wan, followed by Darren Lynn Bousman directing 2 through 4, and David Hackle directing 5. 6 and 7, however, were both directed by Kevin Greutert, a very important man who's actually been here from the start. Greutert has been the editor for every single Saw film so far. His creative voice has been extremely important in making Saw as stylistically iconic as it is. It could be argued that no one has a better knowledge of what goes into making a good Saw film than Greutert, and also me. Saw 6 and 7 both revolve around trial type games with actually a few of the most interesting traps to watch. How well they fit into Jigsaw's supposed morality is a whole different question, but the carousel trap in particular is great from a writing and performance perspective, where there's very limited time for these characters to establish their personality and build up sympathy for their deaths. John's wife Jill has a larger role across 5, 6, and 7, where she's kind of revealed to be a Jigsaw apprentice, but not really, but kinda. And Dr. Gordon is revealed to both still be alive and also a Jigsaw apprentice. I must reiterate, if I don't see them die, they're not dead. I consider 6 and 7 to be their own duology because it contains the full unraveling of Hoffman. He goes fucking berserk in these movies. He becomes a machine. It's crazy. But with the base history out of the way, I'd like to go into more detail. A lot more detail. How about...
All right, so let's get started.
So we're going to build this up bit by bit. We'll start with the obvious, put down a few key dates, and expand the timeline from there. So when does the first Saw take place? Well, everyone knows that. It's the day before 9/11, of course. Such a wacky and memorable piece of film trivia. You may have even told it to your friends or retweeted that photo of it. But if you did, you'd be spreading falsehoods. Wee woo, moron alert. You've just fallen into the biggest rookie mistake of the whole timeline. There's something you need to know about investigating Saw. Sometimes the evidence is wrong. I'll let it slide this time as it's your first day on the force, but you gotta keep your wits about you, partner. You can't be jumping to conclusions at the first piece of evidence. Let's set this piece aside and keep digging. At Paul's crime scene, a moment that happens before the bathroom game, Detective Carey holds up an evidence bag with a visible date on it. March 19th, 2004. It's a lot later than 9/11. She notes that the body is at least 3 weeks out, placing Paul's trap itself back in February 2004. So when faced with two conflicting pieces of evidence, we have to weigh up which is more likely to be lying and then come up with an explanation to eliminate it. The evidence bag is certainly a more reliable date than the phone, but why would the phone say this? Why would the phone lie to us? Here's my theory. Let's say John were to buy this phone at the same time as Paul's game in February 2004. Now let's imagine that upon turning it on, he left the date at the default 010101. He is old after all. Then 8 months and 9 days later, this phone would display the date of 09/10/01. If this is true, then the point at which Adam and Gordon's game takes place would be sometime around October 2004. This date would make a lot more sense. Saw was never intended to be a period piece or anything, and the first Saw was released in October 2004. It makes most sense sense that they just based it in the present day. But let's work it out and see if it all fits. If Mark's test took place the month after Paul's and then Amanda's test shortly after, it would place her trap and her testimony sometime in the April to May 2004 range. Now, when Amanda gave her testimony, Gordon was there to witness it, and when reminiscing on this day during the bathroom game, he says,
"That was 5 months ago."
And 5 months after May is indeed October. And just to drive the nail in the coffin on that 9th of September bit, this phone is a Motorola V60, a device that wasn't released until October of 2001. More evidence will cement what I've currently laid down, but I think this is a nice starting point.
So I'm going to put down some more notes and then we're going to refine it from there. Each of these main games, obviously with the exception of Jigsaw, which we'll get to, they happen in chronological order. So I'm going to lay these out. As we get more evidence, I'm going to link these up. Also, for the sake of clarity, you'll notice that I've color coded these. Whatever information is on a post-it is going to be colored according to which Saw movie it shows up in or when it's first revealed.
But before we can go any further, let's take a dive into the story of the man behind the tapes. John Kramer is a man of many talents. He's an engineer, a philosopher, a contraption builder, a wife guy for now. He started a foundation called the Urban Renewal Group that's all about providing housing to families in need. His wife Jill opened a clinic called Homeward Bound for helping victims of substance abuse get clean.
So they're both dedicated to kind of providing needy people with the means to live a life worth appreciating.
They decide to have a baby, but disaster strikes when a regular of the clinic, Cecil, robs them and knocks their baby out.
The baby is going to be called Gideon, by the way, named after a meat packing plant. That's a weirdly important piece of information.
After the death of Gideon, baby, John becomes extremely depressed and pulls away from everyone in his life, isolating himself. When Art Blank comes over to see how he's doing, that's the guy he started Urban Renewal with,
John lets him know that he's kind of just not interested in helping out needy families anymore. It's kind of just not his vibe. Jill says that shortly after the miscarriage, John receives his cancer diagnosis from Dr. Lawrence Gordon.
John is around for a limited time only, so enjoy him while... Oh no, John!
Upon climbing out of the wreckage, he's filled with a newfound appreciation for life. He decides that anyone else who's going through a tough time should have to face a similar ordeal to the one that he did, and that will cause them to appreciate their life again, I guess. If it works for him, it'll work for everyone. And you know what they say, to appreciate your life, you must divorce your wife. And then he kidnaps Cecil and makes him the first Jigsaw victim. Now, up until this point, there have been no concrete dates anywhere, but this kidnapping scene is actually pretty important. So John had an obsession with pigs, and he decided that Gideon was going to be born on the Year of the Pig. So this is a Year of the Pig festival, therefore, first day of the Year of the Pig should be pretty easy to find out.
It was actually not easy to find out. So there are 12-year gaps between Years of the Pigses. Closest one is in 2007, which is after John's death. Spoilers. And the earliest one before that was 1995.
Okay, give me a sec. Okay, so 1995. Let's start putting them. Cecil's kidnapped January 31st, 1995. So I'm just gonna say everything else. Clinic, urban renewal, miscarriage, cancer, suicide, divorce, etc. That's all just before 1995. So Cecil's trap as the first, it's quite simple. There's no CRT, there's no puppet, there's no recording. We see John experimenting with recording his voice, but he ends up just ultimately performing the lecture live in front of Cecil. The trap is basically he has to push his face into some knives until the chair breaks, I guess. Upon escaping this, he goes, "You're fucking dead." I'm appreciating my life so hard right now. I just need to give you a big hug. John considers this a huge success.
This is a bit of an aside, but I'm pretty sure all of this stuff with John's past was really meant to take place closer to 2002. They just leaned in on the pig imagery so much that when Cecil's kidnapping is shown in Saw 4, they made it the Year of the Pig, but I think they just didn't really consider the last Year of the Pig was almost a decade before the bathroom game.
Timeline's a little wonky, but I'll forgive some of it because, you know, Jesus wasn't born in the year 0, you know what I'm saying? So let's from here, let's skip forward to
We're about to hit a rather contentious part of the timeline, and one I feel pretty strongly about. A man named Seth Baxter is placed in the pendulum trap that appears in the opening scene of Saw 5, where he must crush his fingers in order to escape. He does as instructed, but is not released from the trap. This is because John didn't make this trap, Detective Hoffman did.
Where's a photo of Hoffman? Hoffman's sister had been killed 5 years ago by Seth Baxter and was not sentenced for particularly long because of a technicality. The technicality was someone had written it down as first-degree murder instead of murder.
I made up that last part, but Hoffman's sister is dead and Hoff wants revenge, and according to these crime scene photos from Saw 5, he achieves this in February 2003. But this copycat trap raises some questions. The biggest one being, is this a copycat trap? You'll notice that the Seth Baxter trap takes place between the first Jigsaw victim, Cecil, and the second, Paul. How can this be copying a serial killer if the killer hasn't even gotten 2 victims yet? That's not serial, that's just a murder. And if Cecil was ever found by the police, it certainly wasn't inside of John's workshop. I have to assume he dumped the body somewhere. In which case, how would Hoffman have copied the game element of the killing? From the body, all you could guess was that he was tortured and killed. You wouldn't know anything about the moral lesson angle of it. But let's imagine for a second that Hoffman somehow knew exactly how Cecil's game went. That still wouldn't explain the new elements he added. As I said before, Cecil's trap was pretty stripped back by the standards we know now. This trap had no puppet, no TV, not even a tape. So in fact, Seth Baxter's trap features the TV, the static, and Billy for the first time ever. So, you know, am I saying that Hoffman is actually the one who came up with nearly every iconic element of the Saw traps? Maybe? Let's dig deeper and ask the big questions. When exactly did John build Billy? Hey, can you put away your phone, please? So if you remember, it's not just Cecil's trap that didn't have Billy. Paul's trap didn't have it either, and nor did Mark's. So that's John's first 3 victims. The first time John ever uses Billy is to introduce Amanda's trap. That's in May. Did Billy even exist before May 2004? Maybe if we had footage of John constructing Billy, we could investigate some more. Luckily, I've got it right here. In Saw 3, John is shown constructing Billy right before kidnapping Amanda, meaning around April 2004.
And do not come at me saying, you know, oh, here's Billy in 1995. That's not Billy, that's Bobby. They're different dudes, one's a lot bigger. You know, use your brain. I know that this footage is from him in 2004 because he's bald with a soul patch.
John has 3 significant hairstyle errors across our glimpses of his lifetime. When he is diagnosed with cancer, he has a full head of hair, and when he dies, he also has a full head of hair. Even though I will mark these errors as hair with stubble and hair clean shaven, whether or not he is clean shaven or has stubble is nearly completely random. When he's shown getting diagnosed in Saw 2, he's clean shaven, but when we revisit moments from around this time in Saw 4, he has heavy stubble. He even dies fully clean shaven, but his body has stubble, so who fucking knows what's going on here. Anyway, in between these 2 full head of hair eras, he briefly tried out something new with the bald and soul patch combo. It's a very iconic look. I like it a lot.
Him shaving his head was initially going to be a kind of symbolic gesture of when he became Jigsaw, but they kind of just axed that when they just gave him hair again in Saw 2.
But what it means for us is that the bald and soul patch era becomes a pretty narrow window of time that is hugely helpful for placing some of these events in order. So for example, working backwards, he has a full head of hair in Saw 2, then bald with the soul patch in the bathroom game, but has a full head of hair again when he confronts Hoffman for the Seth Baxter trap. What this means is that the Seth Baxter trap has to predate the entire bald with the soul patch era. Therefore, this footage of him building the puppet cannot possibly take place before the Seth Baxter trap.
Now, you may respond to this evidence by just saying he was actually building a duplicate Billy here, even though in this scenario that you've thrown at me, the imagined first Billy has never been used. It's not in any of these traps, it's not in Cecil's trap. I mean, you can believe that if you want, but you're delusional and you're coping, so...
But what if there are extra victims between 1995 and 2003 that just don't have trap scenes? I mean, if there was any evidence of that, maybe I'd entertain the idea, but as it stands, all evidence points towards there being no victims at all between Cecil and Seth. These files are seen in Saw 5, same film that introduced the Seth trap, so all they really needed to do if they wanted to imply a wealth of unseen victims was throw a few random names in there. But what they did instead was they just moved Mark's trap to the second listing to make it less obvious that John had only done 1 trap before Hoffman did his, even though we know for a fact that Mark's test takes place after Paul's. Several times throughout the series, people will pull out docs or files or photos of these games, and there is never a single name I don't recognize. Every single one of them I can place on a timeline, and not a single one lands between Cecil and Seth.
Paul was always meant to be the first victim. and Cecil barely even counts. When Strahm suspects Hoffman and he pulls out the files, he says to himself,
"Did you help Jigsaw get all of them?"
all of them. Not all of them after those first 6 or 7 between, 1995 and 2003. He said all of them. There are just no victims here. Like, I don't know why John didn't kill anyone in these years. This is fucking 8 years where he didn't do anything. I don't know. Maybe he was tired. Maybe the writers didn't know when the Year of the Pig was. Probably. All I know is there were no victims, because if there were, I would have found them. The truth is, Hoffman invented the format. He pioneered the puppet, he pioneered the CRT, the static, the aesthetic, the style of trap. I mean, he built a more impressive contraption than John had ever built up until this point, and would ever build until like 2006. I mean, so far all that John's built is a chair that breaks and a box of glass. Oh wow, what a fucking genius. I want to reset the energy a little bit. I feel like it's gotten a little heated. It only a movie, It's just a movie.
John is a wee bit mad about the Seth Baxter trap. Don't know why. Hoffman just improved on a format he hasn't touched in almost a decade, but the main contention seems to be that the victim had no way to save themselves. This is an important sticking point because John considers this a betrayal of the fundamental point of the traps. Without a second chance, it's just murder, and killing is distasteful.
Killing is distasteful to me.
Preservation of this rule is extremely important to John. Giving a victim no way out is something he would never do.
During John's confrontation of Hoffman, he tells him that
If a subject survives my method, he or she is instantly rehabilitated.
which is a hilarious thing for him to say, because keep in mind, he has done one trap before. It was 8 years ago, and the guy who survived it tried to strangle him. So, really funny.
But I find it somewhat distasteful to be given credit for work that's not mine. Especially inferior work.
Monday, June 11th. This fits nicely into our timeline. Little bit of a snag here. Nothing to worry about, but as it turns out, June 11th, 2003 did not fall on a Monday. It fell on a Wednesday. The soonest years before and after 2003 to have June 11th fall on a Monday are 2001, before Seth Baxter was even killed, and 2007, after John had died. Spoilers. I am not to be deterred though. I can easily invent an explanation for this. So let's throw out some simple ones first. Let's say explanation 1, the paper is run by morons. Explanation 2, misprint. Explanation 3, Saw takes place in a universe where the calendar is just slightly different to ours, like it shifted over 2 days or something. Maybe if even in this universe, the Year of the Pig starts in 2002. But what if John printed this paper himself? What if John was jealous that Hoffman had improved on his format, a format he hadn't touched in years but nonetheless feels ownership over, and wanted to make it appear as though the Cecil trap had been more legendary than it actually was? He wanted Hoffman to think that he'd sullied his startling reputation in some way. He thought he could use this poorly faked paper to convince Hoffman that he had defiled the Jigsaw name somehow, and therefore owes a debt to the quote-unquote original Jigsaw. And of course, when duplicating the paper, he messed up the date. He is old, after all. Whatever the case, I guess Hoffman fell for it, or maybe just pretended to fall for it to keep his life. Either way, from this point on, Hoffman is the very first Jigsaw apprentice. I personally like to think of it as John being the first Hoffman apprentice, but let's not split hairs. A couple of inconsequential things happen between here and the Paul trap. John's published in a journal of civil engineering, even though he apparently hasn't done anything like that for 8 years. And also some 7-year-old is hit by a car. But don't feel sad, because John is about to be...
Wake up!
That's right, we're in bald with a soul patch country now. Any flashbacks with John rocking this cut have to take place here. So here's Hoffman kidnapping Paul with John, bald. Paul's being tested because he's suicidal, but John says he's faking it for attention.
You cut yourself because you truly wanted to die, or did you just want some attention?
Yeah, that must be why he's out here on his own, contemplating slitting his wrists in his car, alone. For the attention, I guess.
It seems like a pretty real, significant mental health problem to me, but I mean, how could I possibly know more than a divorced civil engineer?
After that, we have Mark, who gets tested for pretending to be sick.
If you're so sick, then why do I have so many photos of you up and about? There's a slow-acting poison in your veins. The antidote is inside the safe. Combination to the safe is inside the safe. By the way, the safe is up and about. Hurry up and program it in, but watch your step. By the way, that's a flammable substance inside the safe.
Yeah, seems pretty harsh for the crime of pretending to be sick.
I know it eventually clarified in 2005 that he's meant to be an insurance scammer, but they don't say anything about that in the movie. And the media that clarification appeared in has since been made non-canon, so I like to imagine he just called in sick to work and John was really mad about it. Then John builds Billy, followed by Amanda's game, testimony, and recruitment.
This one's another one where, like, Donnie Greco didn't really have a second chance, did he? I mean, all he could do was kind of lie there and have his insides scooped out. Like, I thought it was important for them to have a second chance, and it feels like he kind of didn't. Some people have speculated on, like, Donnie having had a game prior to Amanda's, and then he failed it, and then he ended up in Amanda's like that, but I don't buy it.
I'm not buying it.
Amanda is then inducted as the second apprentice, which she's very happy to do because she credits John with turning her life around.
This is a massive success for John because not only has someone finally survived one of his traps, but she's fully rehabilitated. She doesn't do drugs or self-harm aside from the times when she does in secret.
And she's fully mentally stable aside from the fact that she now worships John like a god and is murderously jealous of anyone who holds a crumb of his affection. Aside from that though, totally rehabilitated. It's a miracle. He meets up with Jill for the first time in years to share the good news, and she's convinced.
I brought proof.
Calling Amanda proof that it works is jumping the gun a little bit, I would say. It's been a couple months max since she did her test. I mean, a method with a 100% mortality rate so far, I would call something like wildly unsuccessful. I mean, you know, Cecil was technically out of his test when he died, but let's just charitably call it a 0% rehabilitation rate. How about that?
Right around here is when Detective Singh and Detective Tapp figure out the location of John's new workshop. Upon raiding the building, they find Jeff Reidenhauer in a spooky trap.
His trap seems to need multiple people to it, which is weird because John didn't know that they were going to show up. Or did he? No, he didn't. No reason for Jeff's trap is given in the movie, but in the video game.
Now, I know the games aren't considered canon, but I think it's worth taking a look. According to the games, Jeff was put in his movie trap because of a failed suicide attempt. What a piece of shit. After getting released from this trap, one could argue he was maybe not rehabilitated at all because he attempts suicide again and fails again. John decides he needs just one more dose of rehabilitation, so he gets put in the video game trap. He survives, which allows him to escape and achieve his dream of killing himself off screen.
Great success. So back on track, Singh is killed with a shotgun booby trap non-distastefully, and he also slits Tapp's throat also non-distastefully. You know, Tapp survived. That makes it okay. So despite having met Jigsaw and knowing what he sounds like, Tapp gets convinced that it is Gordon who is Jigsaw, and he hires Adam to take photos of him. Now this is particularly funny because the only thing that Tapp finds out from Adam taking photos is that Gordon is cheating on his wife, which is something that Gordon told Tapp himself back here. So waste of fucking time. While John was at the hospital, he meets this orderly called Zepp, who is really friendly to him, and he repays this friendship by putting him in a trap where he has to oversee the bathroom game with poison in his veins. This is weird not just because Zepp did nothing wrong, but also because he had two apprentices at this point who could have just run the game for him, so.
Anyway, the bathroom game plays out. Tapp doesn't notice that Gordon's been kidnapped, even though he's been spying on the house for months. He jumps in at the last second just to get shot. Gordon's leg falls off, Zepp gets killed, Adam's left behind, and Gordon becomes John's third apprentice. What a day. What a day.
Even though Adam survived, Amanda goes back and kills him, distastefully this time. We never hear John's thoughts on this. I think it's the distasteful kind, but without John's guidance, I can't be sure.
All right, we've made decent headway so far. Let's take a quick break and talk about some supplemental material. A few shorts and whatnot were made around the same time as the first two Saw films. These were made without an idea of how extensive the franchise was going to be or how thoroughly we dip into the backstory of John Kramer, so I don't think a lot of their content really influenced our timeline, but they're fun to look at. Saw Rebirth was a short graphic novel depicting John's background. In the graphic novel, John is lazy and has allowed his life to float right by him. His girlfriend leaves him for his inability to commit, and he struggles with taking control of his life. He gets diagnosed with cancer and is furious about the life that he and others have wasted. Now, this obviously isn't canon anymore. A lot of these details contradict events that are later revealed in the series, but it's still interesting to see. Like, series canon John comparatively has a very fulfilling life. He's a successful engineer, philanthropist, dedicated to helping people alongside his wife. After the miscarriage, he throws that all away for a solitary life of jealousy and spite. In the film, John says that he put Paul in the trap because he doesn't believe that he was really attempting suicide. But in the graphic novel, they say that he put him in a trap because he attempted suicide despite having a very fulfilling life with a home and a wife.
He slashed his wrist. A guy with a wife, family, kids. What the hell was wrong with him?
Series canon John also attempts suicide despite a fulfilling life with a home and a wife. What I'm saying is graphic novel John would have put series canon John in a saw trap. The rebirth in the title refers to John shaving his head, which, as I said earlier, is meant to like symbolize his spiritual transformation into Jigsaw, something that was originally meant to be a scene in the movie too. I like this transformation idea, but it was ditched, so now bald with a soul patch is just kind of a style that he got into for a year and then went back. In Jigsaw, though, we see John as balding with a beard, seeming to imply that he didn't shave his head, he lost his hair and then found it again. Full Disclosure Report was a special feature in the Saw 2 DVD presented by fictional character Rich Skidmore. In this, they identify Paul as the first victim, but called him Paul Stahlberg instead of Paul Leahy. Either way, it makes it obvious that Paul has always been intended to be the first victim. He's the first victim in Saw Rebirth as well. Rich Skidmore mentions Paul's game taking place a little over a year ago, which would place the Disclosure Report around March 2005. They also mention that Lawrence is supposedly still missing. We don't learn too much else from this, and we wouldn't really be able to accept it as canon anyway, but they lean into a general distrust of the police by the general public.
Against brutality against suspects. What brutality? Let me tell you something. What brutality? What brutality? Huh? What brutality? What?
There's a Mark Wahlberg joke here somewhere, but I don't care to find it. And finally, let's talk about Bonesaw. Bonesaw is the 2006 unlicensed gay porn parody of Saw. Now you may be wondering, what? Huh? But it's a more important piece of this jigsaw puzzle than you might think. See, as I said earlier, Saw 3 was the first time we saw the trial format, where one person goes room to room and has the opportunity to save other people's lives by participating in traps with them. But I lied, because before Saw 3 there was Bonesaw, and Bonesaw has the trial format. The traps are a little different, I'll admit. Instead of having to save a woman from getting frozen by retrieving a key, he has to jerk a guy off. Or instead of saving someone from getting their limbs broken, he has to jerk two guys off. But nonetheless, the trial format is unmistakably present. And Bonesaw was released 6 months before Saw 3. And what's more, Leigh Whannell confirmed to GayVN that he knew about it, and he was proud of it. You know you've made it big when they spoof you in porn. Is the most popular game format in the Saw franchise stolen from a 2006 gay porn parody?
And it can be really daunting at first, having someone tell you, okay, you've got 2 months to write it because then we need to start shooting.
Once I agreed to come back on and write Saw 3, the clock started ticking. That's the nature of the Saw films. They're made so quickly that there's really no time to second guess yourself. As soon as I had said yes, the next day I had to go in and pitch some ideas. And so I started racking my brain. I met up with James, and James and I started talking about what the most interesting place to go with the story would be.
Did Leigh Whannell, running low on time and ideas for a series he wanted to step away from, turn to an unlikely source for inspiration? You know, I'll leave that up to you to decide. Actually, no, I won't. It's probably no. Yeah, it's a funny idea, but Saw 3 started filming like a month after Bonesaw was released, and surely they had most of the script done at that point, right? I know they're made on tight margins, but it's quicker than that, right? I mean, who knows? Leigh Whannell, please confirm or deny. Let's get back to this timeline. So quick recap. John's made 5 traps and has so far recruited every single survivor except for Adam because he doesn't deserve it. Hoffman has made the most complex trap so far, and Amanda has spiritually bonded with John. Spiritual seems like the wrong word. She's done the same thing to him that Jacob did to that CGI baby in Breaking Dawn. So what happens next is a local news station broadcasts an interview with a woman called Joan about surviving her jigsaw trap. She doesn't have a trap scene. No details are
really given about why she's in a trap or why she was tested. To be honest, I don't believe her. The news broadcast does say another Jigsaw survivor has come forward, so it has to be after Amanda's trap. I'm assuming it would also be after the bathroom game, so we're talking sometime around here. Anyway, a man called Bobby Dagan sees this and is inspired to make his own fake story about surviving a trap for wealth, fame, and a book deal. You think this might make John happy because a lonely alcoholic has turned his life around and now gives motivational speeches about cherishing your life, but actually he gets really mad and he plots to put Bobby in a trap of his own for real. But Sleepy John is busy planning Saw 2, so for now he just gives veiled threats at a book signing. Don't be fooled by this disguise. That is John, and he does have hair under there, which means we are exiting the bald with a soul patch era and entering the hair and clean shaven era. So we're gonna say this is like hair growth time, you know, a couple months, and we'll place Bobby's book signing sometime around August.
Now I'm cheating the format here. I'm going to jump ahead and kind of show my workings as to how I know where Saw 2 takes place.
So in Saw 4, Rigg's trial, the results of a fingerprint analysis come back and they have a delicious little date on them. Right now, give me that date.
Clear as day, we have the 28th of April 2006. This means both Saw 3 and 4 take place on this date. But also in Saw 4, Hoffman says,
Eric's been missing for 6 months.
Saw 2 takes place in a single day and Eric goes missing at the end of it, which would place Saw 2
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can you believe it? Another October date.
So, Saw 2, October 2005. Everyone in this game is a regular of Jill's clinic and also prior detainees of Eric Matthews. That's the Wahlburger we saw waving the gun earlier. Also, Amanda is in the game, but she's undercover. Undercover for John, not for like the Polis. And then Eric's son is also there. Eric's son, not Eric. His name is Daniel. John's goal with the game is to have Daniel, this guy, survive so that he can be used as the reward for Eric's game. Daniel hasn't really done anything wrong, so it's a little reckless to put him in such obvious danger, but as John says,
if you're good at anticipating the human mind, it leaves nothing to chance.
But also it kind of was left to chance. Everyone in this house was primed to want to kill Daniel for who his dad is. Did John not foresee that it was Xavier's nature to try to bash Daniel's head in with a baseball bat? Or was he just really confident in Daniel's nature to wake up at the last second and slash his throat?
No! I don't want to die!
After the game plays out and everyone dies except for Amanda and Daniel, Amanda knocks him out and puts him in a safe in John's warehouse. The final part of this plan is to lure Eric Matthews to the warehouse by leaving clues in the Venus flytrap room.
Society would call you an informant, a rat, a snitch. I call you unworthy.
Police informant, you get put in a trap if you're a criminal, you get put in a trap if you rat on the criminals. Can't the guy get a break?
Eric's game is having to listen to John talk about his special interests.
You see Detective Darwin's theory of evolution.
It's based on his little trip to the Galapagos. We have a human race that doesn't have the edge.
What do you want?
This is tough enough on its own, but John has tricked Matthews into thinking the house game is happening live. So he's a little antsy, he's a little worried about his son.
Tell me where he is.
He's in a safe place.
Eric loses his patience, forces John to bring him to the house where he's then chained up by Amanda. He escapes the chain in the most painful way possible and then beats the shit out of Amanda, but then Amanda beats the shit out of him. And then Hoffman finds him and he's like, wow, a perfectly good test subject. Just sitting on the floor. And so he locks him up for another 6 months. John knew about all this. He talks in Saw 3 about cleaning up Amanda's mess. I don't know whether or not he like asked her to chain him up or whether it was some kind of protest or it seems like a trap, but like he didn't, if John, was she not meant to? Was she not meant to tie him up? Now this whole Saw 2 thing is the first time John has been seen by the police, so his identity gets released to the public. This leads to interrogations of Jill and, hold up, rewind. Is that a date? Is that a date I see?
I couldn't quite make the date out on the DVD, so I purchased the full Blu-ray to see it in better quality. Then I remembered I don't have a Blu-ray player, so I also bought a Blu-ray player. And with this marginal bump in quality, I can make out that John's identity is released to the public on November 30th, 2005. That fits, thank God.
This is clear, right? This is clear what we're doing. So So by this point, Gordon has almost definitely been released back into the public. It's unclear whether or not there was any news about this, whether anyone questioned him about where he's been, where he got that snazzy new prosthetic leg. It's funny to think that people in universe like didn't notice that he was back or like didn't care. But the real reason is the filmmakers were in a legal battle with Cary Elwes, so they weren't sure if he was gonna come back.
Now, the other apprentices are as of yet unaware of the recruitment of Gordon. Gordon's working behind the scenes doing the surgery shit, like putting a key behind Michael Mark's eye and whatnot, while Hoffman is the heavy lifter meathead and Amanda is the wild card, I guess. Anyway, it's a good thing that Gordon's out of view because Hoffman and Amanda are starting to really butt heads here. Hoffman is very catty and ends up in rivalries with nearly every main character in the series at some point.
So when's your test, detective?
I don't need one.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because I didn't take my life for granted.
As for the reasons behind the Amanda rivalry specifically, both of them want to take over the Jigsaw mantle when John dies, which by the looks of things will be in about 5 minutes. Amanda worships John and thinks Hoffman is unworthy of being his successor. For John's part, he actually sees her fanaticism as one of her greatest weaknesses. And despite criticizing Hoffman's mechanical skills, John views Hoffman's anonymity as his greatest asset. Amanda is known as an accomplice, but Hoffman isn't. Amanda also harbors a lot of resentment because Hoffman got into the gang without having to survive a trap, which is pretty fair. When it comes to what Hoffman thinks about this, I think he doesn't think. I don't think he cares. I mean, he certainly wants to get Amanda out of the way so he can take over as Jigsaw, but not because he has any strong ideological connection to what John is up to. He's mostly just interested in building big machines that torture people. He's kind of like a Lego adult who also enjoys hurting people, and he found a way to combine those two passions.
John notes at one point that Hoffman is not a true killer.
But you're not a true killer.
Which is, not true. Hoffman loves killing. It's actually his favorite thing to do ever. Every waking moment, he's searching for another opportunity to kill. So anyway, John finds himself greatly weakened by the Eric Matthews beating and also, the cancer. So he has to trust his unruly stepchildren to go and set up all the traps for him. Hoffman diligently builds all the traps, but Amanda, being the problem child that she is, starts rigging these traps to be unescapable. Surprise, Amanda wasn't rehabilitated by her trap, and she knows it, and so she thinks no one can be rehabilitated by these traps. I would partially agree with her here, actually. The real change that she went through was convincing herself that she'd kind of entered into this higher ring of like moral authority, where she gets to look down on and punish bad people. Rigging the trap seems to be her way of making sure that immoral people never get that second chance.
Nobody changes. It's all a lie. I'll tell you, she hasn't changed. Because nobody fucking changes. Nobody is reborn. It's all bullshit. It's all a fucking lie.
She does this with Troy's trap and Detective Carey's trap. Hoffman either doesn't notice or straight up doesn't care, but he was present for these traps as he aided in planting the shell casing with Officer Rigg's fingerprints. By the way, the same day these fingerprints were analyzed, Hoffman says
Eric's been missing for 6 months. Carey was gone for 4 days.
Putting Carey's trap undoubtedly on the 24th of April.
So then John hatches the idea of Jeff's trial to kill several birds with one stone. For one, it tests Jeff, a man who hasn't been appreciating his life enough since his son got killed. Remember, right over here? It gives him an excuse to bring in Jeff's wife, Lynn, who's a really good surgeon and can hopefully keep John alive for a little bit longer. And it triples as a test for Amanda, obviously unbeknownst to Amanda. At the same time, they also use the Zepp method to make Art Blank set up Rigg's trial. Remember Art Blank? He was the guy we started Urban Renewal with, and also John's lawyer, and also Jill's lawyer, and also this guy's lawyer. There's one lawyer in this town. During the setup for all this, Hoffman and Amanda continue to butt heads, and John starts having second thoughts about Hoffman when he sees how he treats the unconscious bodies of the victims.
That's a human being.
It's a human being, is it? You're about to put it in a device that twists the arms, legs, and head until the whole body is backwards. You're about to put him in a device that twists the arms, legs, and head until the whole body is backwards. You're annoyed that Hoffman was rough with the unconscious body when the next thing you're going to do to that body is put it in a device that twists the arms, legs, and head until the whole body is backwards. I fucking hate you.
And all of this takes place in Gideon building. John puts together a secret box, and inside the box are some envelopes, and inside the envelopes are photos of the future victims of the Easton trial. And he gives the key for this box to the person he trusts most in the world, his ex-wife, whom he hasn't spoken to in almost 2 years, who has just arrived to ask him to please stop killing people.
Please stop. Don't do this.
So now these two trials start.
Rigg's trial is all about how he has an obsession with trying to stop people from making the wrong choices.
Obsession to stop those around you from making the wrong choices.
I think the call's coming from inside the glass house that you're throwing rocks from. You ever thought about that? The main thing I like about Rigg's trial is that we get to see Strahm in action, who is just disrespectful to the environment and the people around him. He rivals Hoffman's cattiness. Like he comes in and he's throwing things and he's rolling his eyes and he's like grabbing pictures off the wall and like shoving people out of the way.
Look at these photos. Tell me how you feel.
He brings Jill in for interrogation because there was a photo of her on the wall and he thinks that serial killers leave photos of themselves at their crime scenes. No, Strahm, that's something only Joker do. He barely lets her speak during these scenes and gets really pissed when she does.
What's with the doll? What's with the tricycle? Who were John's business associates before he went insane?
It wasn't the associate type.
Where the hell is Art Blank?
I don't know if you remember this lyric, but I mean, he cracked me up. He would be in here, he basically would look at the script, he would glance at it, and he'd say, I'm not saying that. And then he'd go in and just say something else.
There's a bit where he like yells at her non-stop, not giving her a chance to speak. Then after asking no good questions and therefore getting no good answers, leaves, stands in the hallway for a minute, figures it out in his brain in like 2 seconds, and then turns around and walks back in and starts yelling at her again. Strahm is incredible, and he's easily one of my favorite characters in the series. You never know what he's gonna do next. There's a point in the interrogation where he points his gun at Jill and himself. Say what you want about the man, but he will do absolutely anything to get zero information out of a person. Jeff hasn't been appreciating his life since his son died, which is kind of pathetic. His trial is all about having to save the people who were involved in his son dying. So there's the driver that did it, the judge that let him off with a pretty light sentence, and the witness who fled the scene and didn't give their testimony. John says that this witness's testimony could have, like, you know, helped put the guy away for longer.
If not for her own self-absorption and cowardice, she could have brought your son's killer to justice.
I have a quick question. How does John know who this woman is? If she fled the scene and no one like got her name or anything, how does he know who she is or what she looks like? Unless John was also there, in which case, John, why aren't you testifying? John does this a few times where he's like, you know, oh, you witnessed this crime and you did nothing. But the only way John could know that they witnessed the crime is if he witnessed them witnessing the crime, in which case he also did nothing. So, put yourself in a trap. Put yourself in a fucking trap, dude. Put yourself in a trap. Put yourself in a trap. Put yourself in a trap. Put yourself in a trap.
I'm a fan of good writing.
So at the end of his trial, Jeff will find his wife, Lynn, whose test is to keep John alive while Amanda is on the brink of a fucking rampage. Every time John gives any sort of praise to Lynn, Amanda's just like... Amanda's secret test is to not do that. Her secret test is to not freak out and start shooting people, which is, unfortunately, for her and everyone else here, too tall of a task.
She doesn't deserve to go free. You promised. I promise you.
See, John knows that she'd been sabotaging traps, and he's giving her one last chance to show that she's capable of letting someone get away. Because John knows that if she kills Lynn, then Jeff will kill her and then also kill John, which will kill Lynn again. But yeah, she failed. Or did she?
See, it seems like this is a really fitting end for Amanda. She was never truly rehabilitated because John didn't create a rehabilitated woman. He groomed a vulnerable companion.
You will give everything to me, every cell in your body.
I don't mean anything to you, and I'm just a pawn in your stupid games.
I've tried to help you, Amanda.
So help me. Fix me. I'm standing right here.
At the thought of losing her place at his side, her jealousy and spite tears this toxic relationship apart and kills them both.
You give her control over me? Fuck you!
There's something tragic and even darkly romantic about this storyline's end. Even if she were to succeed in this test and survive past him, it's hard to imagine Amanda even being able to cope without him.
In Saw 3, John directs Amanda to a note that he left for her, and she reads it and she weeps. Many assume this to be, you know, a letter of goodbye or a will of some sort that would spark her, you know, violent, upset behavior.
What is in the envelope? It's not important. The fact that there is an envelope and it says something that's emotional to her is what's important.
But what if I told you that's not what's on this note? The obvious implication of this note was changed 3 films later in Saw 6. It was now that Hoffman had intercepted the note and written his own note that was a threat to Amanda. What did John's original note say? I don't know. No one knows.
Finally answered, except it's not fully answered because Jigsaw initially wrote a letter that was replaced by Hoffman, but we're not going to talk about that right now.
But what we do know is that Hoffman's note said, hey, I know you were there on the night that Gideon died, and I'm going to tell John unless you kill Lynn. How did Hoffman know that she was there when the only other person who knew she was there died here? I can't be sure, but I think that as John's body weakens, his powers of omnipotence that he used to find where Danica Scott is like seeping into Hoffman's body, and he's being filled with this power and knowledge that he doesn't even know what to do with yet. But yeah, this change means that it went from, you know, a good arc, good finish to Amanda's story to make it just a storyline where Hoffman was being a bit of a scamp.
Get used to me. I'm not going anywhere.
You sure about that?
So anyway, the result of both of these trials is a 100% mortality rate. Like, obviously aside from the fact that Hoffman escapes the trap he was pretending to be in, but like, John and Amanda are dead now too. It's incredible, really. The traps that John managed to conduct in his lifetime were outrageously unsuccessful. Like, his one model student, Amanda, turned out to not be rehabilitated. So not a single person was rehabilitated, unless you count Joan, which I don't, because I don't believe her.
Also, actually, that one woman who's being abused by her husband survived, and maybe she's rehabilitated, who knows?
And these games had more collateral damage than just John and Amanda. At one point, Strahm and Perez are having this conversation, and the film suddenly gets really self-conscious that it's being boring, so this cop dies. Halts the movie for like 10 seconds, and then they just continue their exposition in the hallway. Perez also just kind of gets shrapneled in the face. This isn't a game or anything, it's just a grenade. Seems distasteful, TPH. Strahm is so upset about this that he throws the same stack of files off of his desk about 8 times. Strahm shows up moments too late to shoot John or Amanda, so he shoots Jeff instead. With John out of the way and no Amanda to tattle on him, Hoffman can finally put Strahm in an inescapable trap. And then he can walk out of this looking like the hero. I forgot to mention that Lynn and Jeff's other child is also there. She's not in a trap or anything. She's just also there. But Hoffman didn't account for the fact that Strahm will do anything to survive. He gives himself an impromptu tracheotomy with a pen so that he can breathe until help arrives. Like, you know, where is he? Eric Matthews breaking his foot to get out of the chains in the bathroom was pretty metal, but this blows that out of the water. Easily one of the coolest things anyone's done in the whole series. He appreciates his life so hard. All of this, Rigg's trial, Jeff's trial, you know, Perez dying, the Amanda note, John's death, and Strahm's trap all take place on the same day. It was pretty eventful. This is a huge day for the Saw case. Obviously, you got John dying, but it was an even bigger day for Hoffman. In one fell swoop, nearly everyone who's ever seen him do Jigsaw activities is out of the picture. And he gets promoted too, so that's nice. But he does still have some battles to fight. Of course, Strahm is still alive. He's probably one of the only people powerful enough to stop him. And Jill has also seen him do Jigsaw activities, so he needs to get rid of her. But the other thing is the FBI. Where's my boy? Where's my boy Danny? The other big problem that he's going to run into is that the FBI, headed by Dan Erickson, are now very suspicious that Jigsaw had someone on the inside. As you can tell already from the amount of space we have left on the board, the events from Saw 6 and Saw 7 happen pretty condensed. It's about to get kind of tight, but hopefully it's as readable as the rest of this is. So what happens next is Strahm gets kicked off the case for being too emotional, and Hoffman gets promoted. Let's go ahead and throw that somewhere in, like, let's say it's like May 2006.
And we've learned that every day Life should be cherished.
Hoffman, don't say that thing. That's the thing that Jigsaw says. During John's hog display, they find the tape that he swallowed before he died. And it's basically a message to Hoffman being like, oh, you think you're gonna get out of this without being tested? Well, you're getting tested, buddy. It's coming. Ooh, toe tag. Toe tag? Toe tag? A date, perhaps? A date, maybe? Yeah, it's a little annoying. It's always kind of too dark or too far away to make out what's on the toe tag. We could double confirm that his death was definitely on the 28th of April. If only there was some way we could see it. What's this? Is this a real, genuine, screen accurate John Kramer toe tag? And hey, you like dates? How about October
21st. The tag says October 21st. Who's lying? Okay, so the fingerprints analysis that happens on the same day as Saw 4, which means it happened the same day as Saw 3, which means it's the same day that John dies. That clearly says April 28th, but the toe tag says October 21st. So what's going on? What's going on? Maybe someone at the coroner's got confused and wrote down the date of autopsy instead of the date of death. Actually, even that doesn't make sense, because that would mean that he was just sitting on ice for like 6 months before they remembered to perform an autopsy. The most notorious serial killer in this indiscernible state's history. They just forgot. Whatever, who fucking cares? I'm just gonna say the cops are illiterate and leave it there.
It goes autopsy, Jill gets the box, Strahm gets fucking... It goes autopsy, Jill gets the box, Strahm gets kicked off the case, Hoff gets promoted, and then Fire 5 game. So the Fire 5 game doesn't really matter. The event that caused it all happened like here. It doesn't matter. There's so much context around, like, all you need to know is that it happened right here. And Strahm and Perez investigated at the time, but they didn't find anything. So the only thing that matters is the cop drama that's surrounding this game. And it goes like this.
Hoffman gets a strange letter in his office, and while it seems like it would make sense that Strahm wrote this, it's actually from Gordo. So the idea behind this is that back when Hoff did the Seth Baxter trap, John sent Hoff one of these notes to freak him out, I guess. And now Gordo is doing the same thing. It's unclear whether this is by instruction from John or not. Like, did John tell him to do this before he died, or did he say it in the note? It's hard to explain, but basically in Saw 7, there's a reveal that Gordo is alive, and he has a flashback to Jill dropping a tape over to him. On the tape, John says, "You are my greatest asset," and then we get a flashback within that flashback showing Gordo doing a bunch of things, but most importantly, we see him writing the note. So this is the tape that came in the big box. It was delivered after John's death, and maybe on the tape he instructs Gordo to write the note to Hoffman, but having a flashback to writing the note within the flashback about receiving the tape implies that he wrote the note before he got the tape, right? Which would mean that he had just done it out of nowhere, not by instruction of John, and so happened to do the same thing that John had done 3 years ago.
Or maybe John like told him the story of him writing that note one time, and he was so moved by it that he was like, I gotta do that. It's hard to say, impossible to discern, and completely unimportant. So we're gonna move on. Hoffman thinks the note is from Strahm, I think. So he hatches a plan to get rid of him. He figures if he can find a way to pass suspicion of being John's apprentice onto Strahm and then kill him, he'll just be scot-free, do what he wants. He ropes Jill into this plan for the sake of mutual benefit, but don't get it twisted, these two are not on good terms. At this point, Strahm is still investigating the Jigsaw case, even though he's been kicked off it. His detective style could be charitably described as holistic. He just kind of goes to the crime scenes of Jigsaw traps and then gets flashbacks to events he wasn't there for.
You killed him. Made it look like a jigsaw trap.
That reveal of Hoffman receiving the note from John is placed in one of these flashbacks, so there is a non-zero chance that Strahm made this up.
I mean, the thing about Strahm is he's extremely powerful, but in a very delusional way. Like, he is always correct, but if I was another cop in this universe, I would never listen to him. So Hoffman calls Erickson, and he's like, hey, I can't seem to get a hold of Strahm, but you know, he theorized that there was a man on the inside, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And he's like, interesting. And then Jill comes in and she's like, oh, I think someone's following me. I think it's Strahm, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And he's like, interesting. And then Hoffman, using Strahm's phone that he stole from evidence, calls Erickson again, but hangs up without saying anything. And Erickson's just like, that's it. I'm fucking tired of this freak. Someone track his phone.
But the phone has now been planted in the surveillance room for the Fatal 5 game. All the pieces are in place. Now he just needs to get rid of Strahm. He lures Strahm to a trap room, and hey, it's the glass coffin.
Remember from way back here? Is this what John had in mind for it? Who knows? Anyway, the tape's like, hey, just get in this box and you'll be fine. And Strahm's like, no, you get in this box and you'll be fine. And Hoffman's like, okay. And Strahm's like, since Strahm's phone leads Erickson to the Fatal 5 game, where he finds the last 2 survivors and gets to pat himself on the back for finding out who the inside man was. It's a good thing that no one at the FBI seemed to know that Strahm's phone was meant to be in evidence.
So now Hoffman is free to start lathering Strahm's fingerprints all over his crime scenes, like in the Moneylenders game, which we're going to put right here.
I really like this game. Simone is one of my favorite trap victims. I don't like that sentence. She gives a really good performance. But in the middle of Hoffman's victory lap, he's hit with the bombshell that Perez is still alive. And to make matters worse, he's really bad at hiding how mad he is about this.
So you let me think she was dead? Well, I didn't know I could trust.
But as for now, the FBI is still eating out of the palm of his hand, so he plays it cool. He's like, oh wow, that's so great. I'm so happy for you. Oh, also Hoffman, we think someone else made the Seth Baxter tape, so we're gonna look into it and see what we find. Oh wow, that's so great. That's a great job. Good job, detective. The walls are closing in on Hoffman. He doesn't have a whole lot of time left. He has to act fast. So he goes to Jill's office where her desk lamp is turned on by the wall switch. Just an interesting detail. And he's like, give me those envelopes. I'm running the games. Don't talk to me. So it seems like John had at least in part entrusted Jill with running the Easton trial. I would say that he like vastly overestimated how ride or die Jill is, considering but as with everything else, he will be 100% right about this, despite all available evidence. By the way, William Easton is John's health insurance provider who refused to cover experimental cancer treatments. But what's weird about this is John had met Easton before at the Homeward Bound opening party and had gotten testy with him about his shady business practices.
So in a sense, you choose who lives or dies, but you're not taking into consideration the most important human element of all, the will to live. Until a person is faced with death, it's impossible to tell whether they have what it takes to survive.
First of all, just insane thing to say unprompted. Second of all, why did you sign up with this guy if you hate the way he treats his clients?
If you do this, you'll be on your own, and the subsequent cost to you will be staggering.
Don't talk to me about money. I have money. This is about principle. Piranha.
You knew he was gonna deny you coverage and you did it anyway to make a point? That's fucking crazy, man. Anyway, when does this take place? So if he's meeting with his insurance, it's probably close to his cancer diagnosis. But if he's tried other methods already, maybe it's a bit later. Maybe it's like here. Hold on, what was that on his desk? Is that a clue? Look at that right there. A wireless mouse. Now, wireless mouses have been available since like 1991, not helpful for our timeline, but this doesn't look like a 1991, 1995 wireless mouse. It looks more like an early 2000s wireless mouse to me. If I can find this specific brand of mouse, I can prove that John's cancer diagnosis, and therefore the rest of this stuff that we claim happens in 1995, actually happened somewhere around 2002. Now, unfortunately, despite a lot of research, I was unable to find a conclusive, definitive source on what mouse this is. The keyboard, however, this right here is the Microsoft Natural Ergonomic Keyboard 4000. I have circled some similarities between them. We have this little center notch with the 2 buttons. We have this curved centerpiece of buttons in the middle, and we have the little notch for the Microsoft logo in the right there. So these are definitely the same. Now, while the Microsoft Natural Keyboard was released in 1994, the Natural Ergonomic Keyboard 4000 wasn't released until 2005, which overshoots my timeline a little bit. Oh no, wait, hold on. If I'm thinking about this all wrong, because I'm looking at this scene of him talking to Easton, and he's got hair. And I'm assuming that this is from hair and stubble era, before bald and soul patch era. But what's preventing this scene from taking place in the hair and clean shaven era? Like maybe this scene takes place closer to the Bobby Book signing scene when he had a similar do. Like more evidence points to it being in 2005 than it does in 1995. So like yeah, he gets diagnosed. He tries out different treatments and stuff. He realizes it's getting worse. He sees some experimental procedure to help him out, and he does it sometime here. So bald and soul patch era ends, a little bit of hair growth time, maybe like July, August could be where this is. You might say like, oh, it's a 2005 keyboard because the film was, made in 2009, so it's not meant to be a signifier of the time, but I don't know. It all has to mean something, right? I mean, you don't just give a guy a keyboard and a mouse but no screen. Where's the computer? What the fuck is going on in this office?
Hey, Editing Doug here. I've declared this venture into Waffle City over!
Okay, so Hoffman's trying to do Easton Strahl, he's trying to keep everything under wraps, but uh-oh, the FBI just found out that Strahm's fingerprints replaced post-mortem. And double uh-oh, they found the Seth Baxter tape and they're working on reversing the voice modulation to find out who recorded it.
Hoffman can either disrupt the reverse distortion of the voice and make it seem like Strahm did it, or break away from Erickson and Perez and go into hiding in advance of their discovery. But he chooses a secret, more evil third option. I want it to be known that when it comes to both Hoffman and Strahm, I suddenly begin to understand how some people feel about certain enigmatic public figures, like K-pop stans or fans of Hatsune Miku or Kendall Roy or Germa. I feel an intense and slightly irrational love for these characters. I love them both so much. I love seeing them at work, and I love seeing the girls fighting. I am playing both sides of the Strahm-Hoffman conflict, so I always end up on top. Every day I am upset that the war between this beautiful maniac and this humongous dumbass only lasted a single movie.
This little mini massacre would be the most badass thing Hoffman has ever done if it wasn't for everything he does after this point. So he burns the place to the ground, then manages to make it back to Easton Strahl just to catch the end of it, but triple uh-oh, Jill had kept one of the envelopes from him. She puts him in a new and improved, though it does the same thing, version of the reverse bear trap and leaves him to die. How's he gonna get out of this one? I know this is such a huge moment, but we have to pause for a second. Is this what John wanted? I know that John has teased wanting to test Hoffman back since his death, but strapped to a chair, no key, no way out, like, we in the biz call this distasteful. Also, according to the commentary track on the Saw 6 Blu-ray, the end of the Easton trial was meant to trigger the start of the Hoffman game.
Originally, we wanted Williams' game to be tied to Hoffman's game,
right,
so that if and when the lever is pulled as his die, it turns on the head trap. Yeah. And we weren't allowed to shoot that, but this director's cut is kind of cut to at least imply that that's what's happening. So
it seems like it was always John's intention to have Hoffman tested here at this moment, but like, I don't know, did Jill just decide not to give him a way out? You're going to talk a big game about, oh, this is what John would have wanted, and then do something that John obviously wouldn't have wanted?
It's not what John wanted.
Someone has betrayed John here. And we can't rule out the possibility of that someone being John. He's been given a tough situation, but Hoffman will prevail because he actually appreciates his life more than anyone else on the planet.
Telling Jill to put Hoffman in a trap is such an obvious suicide mission that I cannot rationalize it in any way other than John is trying to get her killed. This failed attempt on Hoffman's life has only made him angrier.
Jill recognizes the magnitude of what she's done, and she immediately turns herself into the police for protection. They place her in a safe house as if punished Hoff recognizes such false borders. But as for now, he goes into hiding, he tends to his wounds, and he plans the single most devastating event in the entire timeline.
But first, another tangent. Those who have seen Saw 7, or Saw 3D as losers call it, know that it opens with a new kind of trap, one that takes place in a publicly viewable setting. It seems weird that Hoffman would take the time to set up a trap in public while on the run, when the focus of the trap is over a simple, messy love triangle. Furthermore, what's the point of this trap? All other opening traps had something to do with the rest of the film, but this one just doesn't. It is never brought up again, and no other traps in the movie continue this in public theme. Well, as with everything else Saw related, I have all the answers. So Saw 7 was originally going to be 2 movies, but after the relative underperformance of Saw 6 in the face of Paranormal Activity, the studio got spooked and requested it be turned into 1 movie. The scripts of these final 2 movies were already being written, so the compression of the plot into 1 film came with noticeable scars. The return of Gordon was meant to be an end reveal to Saw 7 in part 1, but instead became the very first thing we see in the final film. Saw 6 had been marketed off the tagline, "His disease is spreading," which makes me think that the public-facing element of this trap was going to be more of a theme across these final 2 parts.
There was one thought that Bobby's final game at the end was to take place in a wide open public space, thereby taking the man whose public figure, who was widely known for this, was now ultimately going to be proven in a public court.
Also, how the scene was originally meant to end was a slow pan to the crowd, and standing among them would be John Kramer next to Gordon. It was intended to be one of the very first traps that John shows him. So if John is in public and standing, it would have to be taking place before the events of Saw 2, since after that his identity was revealed and he's bedbound. So while this public display trap in the final film seems to be implied to take place just after Saw 6, the actual intended placement of this trap would be somewhere between the 2 Octobers of 2004 and 2005. I'm going to place it roughly in April, and this is a complete shot in the dark, but I imagine that he had the soul patch in this scene. So back to the timeline, Bobby, while on his national tour, gets kidnapped and put into a Saw trial. This trial is fucked up for a number of reasons. One, lying about being in Saw trap, not a big deal, to be honest. 2, Bobby's girlfriend, who did not know he was lying, is chained in an oven for the whole thing and is burned alive when Bobby fails. I just want to reiterate, Bobby's girlfriend, unaware of his misdeeds, is brutally burned alive with no means to affect her own escape. How are you going to talk a big game about how everyone deserves a second chance, everyone deserves a chance to affect their... She didn't do anything wrong and she didn't have a chance to get out. The whole thing about how the traps aren't just unless the person is given a chance rings particularly hollow when the person who's not being given a second chance actually didn't do anything wrong.
Oh my gosh, can we really kill a completely innocent person? Doesn't that go against, previous entries where there was at least a guilt by association for the William Easton victims? But really, Joyce is probably the first absolute innocent.
And third of all, Bobby is only in this lie because in a deleted scene, Gordon encouraged him to join the Jigsaw victim support group. Like he wasn't going to do it, but then Gordon was like, "Oh, after you, please." Gordon obviously knew he wasn't a Jigsaw victim. Call that entrapment, huh? Entrap. Maybe Gordon just draws the line at making DVDs about it.
I'm sure I speak for everyone here when I say how grateful we are to be part of your promotional DVD.
My favorite thing about Gordon showing up to these meetings like a guy revisiting his high school despite graduating 12 years ago is that no one knows who he is.
So what's with the creepy guy with the game? Someone I should know about?
No. He's been at these meetings longer than I have. He's fine.
Maybe they just don't recognize him because he's speaking in a way he's never spoken before. I would like further elaboration on this topic sometime, actually. Is Gordon publicly known as a Jigsaw trap survivor? He is working in a new hospital now, and we never get to see the name on his door, so he could be living under a new identity? Who knows? Right now I have nothing to go on. So while Gordon is doing important things like haunting the Jigsaw survivor meetings, what's our boy Mark up to? Punishoff is out here, angry, injured, stupid, planning some real tomfoolery. It all starts with setting up base in a secret room in an auto shop and running a game with some neo-Nazis out front.
I'm in a sticky situation in this scene.
As the cops are packing the bodies away, a large explosion goes off in the courtyard, spurring Matt Gibson to hurry all evidence back to base. Matt Gibson, by the way, is the guy who granted Jill protection. He has not shown up before, but all of the main cop characters were killed in the last film, so he's here now, and they act like he's been here the whole time. They establish a flimsy past between him and Hoffman where, like, somewhere back here, Hoffman shot an unarmed homeless guy. The act of shooting this unarmed homeless guy got Hoffman promoted. So think about that next time someone tells you these films aren't realistic. Anyway, Jill is understandably extremely paranoid that Hoffman's gonna find her, and Matt Gibson's like, "Oh, it's safe here, dumbass. It's a safe house."
What makes you think you can't find me here?
Jill, it's a safe house. Safe house. Safe house. You get it?
Gibson, this was sent here addressed to Jill. Hoffman knows their location.
God damn it.
So because of this, Jill gets moved from the safe house to the police station, where through a further series of DVDs, Hoffman sends Matt Gibson on a wild goose chase to keep him occupied. But the most important thing that Hoffman gives us is a date. Our final date. In an email seen on screen for just a few seconds, we see that the date is March 12th, 2007. This is the date for the horsepower trap, Bobby's trial, and the rest of Saw 7. By the time that Gibson realizes what's going on, it's already too late. He shows up at Hoffman's hideout, but Hoffman's long gone, and in his place, a gun.
So where's Hoffman? Well, during that explosion, Hoffman slipped into one of the body bags. So he's already at the police station. He hops out the body bag and he just starts hacking and slicing. He stabs this guy, he stabs this guy, he stabs this guy, he breaks her neck. He does some like wacky Looney Tunes shenanigans with her body. Then he stabs this guy and he shoots this guy. Jill's freaking out, she's screaming for help, but Hoffman's already killed everyone in the world. She stabs him in the neck and his only response is bitch. He finds her, he kicks her, he puts her in the reverse bear trap, and we finally get the lethal payoff to one of the oldest and most iconic traps in the franchise. This whole sequence of Hoffman taking out the entire police force is so incredibly powerful. It's very emotional for me. Hoffman has proven that he cherishes his life more than anyone else, and he wins. But with a few more minutes left in the film, Hoffman burns down his workshop, goes to walk off into the sunset when he's suddenly subdued by Gordon and two other guys. Who are they? Apprentices? More apprentices? It's Brad and Ryan. This is presumably a kind of cut thread from the fact that it used to be two movies. It's really interesting to me that nearly everyone who survives the saw trap is very easy to convince to put more people in saw traps. Finally, Gordon brings him to the original bathroom, locks him up, throws away the saw, and leaves him for dead.
Game over.
Now that you know exactly what order it all happens in, let's break it down into 4 easy periods. We have the pre-Saw 1 period, which is all the 1995 and earlier stuff, things like John's history and the various inciting incidents that led John to become Jigsaw. Next is the early Trap period across 2003 and 2004. Here we have the traps for Seth, Paul, Mark, and Amanda, finishing with the bathroom game. In this period, he starts his Bald with a Soul Patch era, and he might also end it within this period too, but I can't be sure with the current evidence. The bathroom game is the final time we see him with this style, but it's almost a year before we have a confirmed John with hair sighting, so this era could extend into early 2005, or it could end immediately after the bathroom game. After this, we have the John trial period ending in his death, followed by the post-John trial period ending with Hoffman's kidnapping. Looking back at all these colors, you can see why I divide the series as I do. First trilogy kind of shows John's prominence from the point that the cops knew about him until his death. 4 and 5 detail this kind of rivalry arc between Hoffman and Strahm, ending with Strahm getting squanched. And then 6 and 7 are between Hoffman and Jill, but mainly Hoffman just kind of going off the rails. I'm a big fan of these rivalry plots, like, you know, the Strahm versus Hoffman, Amanda versus Hoffman, Jill versus Hoffman. I think I just like Hoffman. But what does the future look like? How does Jigsaw fit into this? Don't worry, I'll be quick. So the main bulk of the Jigsaw cop plot takes place 10 years after John's death, so 2016. I'm just gonna put it like this. I'm not extending the timeline at the moment because there's not that much to figure out in 2016. However, what it does reveal that's relevant to our timeline is that the barn trial shown in it takes place before all other significant saw traps. So I guess, you know, this is the part where I get disproven about there being no canon traps in between Cecil and Seth Baxter. This will blow my theory out of the water that, you know, Hoffman started it all. Guess it was fun while it lasted. Except, just kidding, I'm never wrong. Notice anything about John in these scenes? I hope I've trained you well enough to recognize a glaring clue when you see it. Bald, soul patch, remember, a style John did not have until after he recruited Hoffman, which places the barn trial around here. Logan recruitment the same day. Hoffman theory stays strong. Cope Sieve, Mauled, etc. Plenty of people are not keeping their wits about them, and it's very disappointing. Every time I see someone try to make a timeline, they're always fucking about with these baseless claims of traps taking place before the pendulum trap. The survivors in Saw 7 are not evidence of victims before Seth Baxter because they explicitly say during Amanda's testimony that she was the only one who made it. So there are no public survivors before Amanda. If these people's traps were to be put on a timeline, the earliest they could be would be mid-2004. So stop citing this scene as proof of pre-Seth victims, and stop placing other survivors before Amanda. She's a trailblazer. Even the timeline section of the Saw wiki still lists the barn trial as taking place before the Seth Baxter trap. Wrong. John's wiki lists Logan's recruitment before Hoffman's recruitment. Wrong again. The hairstyle is a deliberate choice, guys. It's a very specific period of time. Why does everyone ignore this? Also, if you consider the fact that no one in the barn trial clocks that this is a Saw trap, it doesn't seem like Jigsaw is well known as a serial killer at this this time. That makes sense since there's only 2 traps attributed to him at this point, but it means he certainly wasn't well known as a serial killer at a time where there was only 1 trap attributed to him. What I'm saying is the paper is fake. Real quick though, isn't it also crazy how Logan runs the same test in 2016 but with different people, and they just so happen to have the exact same body types and hair colors as the people who died in the original Barn trial, and they so happen to die in the exact same way as their counterparts, except for the guy that took the place of Logan, who he just let die instead of saving him like he was. Like, I thought he was recreating the previous traps. And how did John know that this guy caused the car crash, and how did he know that this guy knew the brakes were damaged, and how did he know that she smothered her baby, and how did he know that she robbed that woman? And also, John says it can never be personal, but he put Logan in a trap because he messed up the labeling of his x-ray, which seems pretty personal to me. And also, Carrie and Rigg were put in traps purely because they were investigating the Jigsaw case, so the never personal angle doesn't really hold up. And also, it's not really his fault that he messed up the labeling on the x-rays because they both have identical patient information. Also, is this a date? What do you think? 9th of September 2002? That's certainly more evidence for my the writers don't know when Chinese New Year is theory. Because this labeling is meant to take place before he knew he had cancer, which would realistically place it before the divorce. Like, I really think all of this is meant to just be shifted up to here. But yeah, aside from that, Jigsaw was okay. This one's directed by the Spirig brothers, who haven't done anything Saw before. It doesn't compete with 6 and 7. And as it currently stands, Logan's not a super compelling apprentice. I don't want to see these characters abandoned completely though. I think there's interesting directions you can take them. The twist was pretty good. It had that excellent quality of seeming smart at first, but making absolutely no sense when you think about it for 5 seconds. Which, to be clear, is exactly what I want out of a Saw twist. I like that John went from this like big elaborate trap with flat screen TVs to single room traps with tape recorders. I liked it, but I didn't love it, and it was lacking appearances from other characters we know to be alive. You know, Gordon's still alive, Bobby's still alive, Jones still alive, Brad and Ryan are still alive, and most importantly, Hoffman is still alive. That's right, I said it, Hoffman's still alive, we all know it. You know what, you think he was just gonna roll over and die in the bathroom? Eric Matthews escaped this exact same situation. You think he appreciates his life more than Hoffman? You think that Hoffman, who escaped the reverse bear trap by breaking his thumbs and ripping off part of his face, wouldn't be able to escape this? You're delusional. Yeah. Hey, horror.fandom.com, remove Hoffman from the lists of deaths in the Saw franchise wiki. He's not dead, you are lying. And if Hoffman doesn't show up in any future Saw releases, I'm gonna riot. Also, if you do any flashbacks, bring back Strahm. Also Simone. Simone is alive. Simone is still alive, bring her back. So, you know, overall, it's pretty simple once you get your head around it. You know, if there are any future flashbacks, they're probably going to take place like here in this kind of center point, because this is the like only real significant chunk of time where he was regularly practicing traps before he was bedridden. So what, that's like October 2004 to October 2005. A lot of things are going to take place within here. So bottom line is, I need this franchise to continue so I can continue overcrowding this board and falling in love with characters as I have with the Hoff. And also, yes, you'll notice I have not included Spiral. That's because it is not a Saw movie and I don't respect it. And I'm very excited for Saw 10 because Kev is back. Kevin Greutert, my man, is directing a Saw movie again. Hi, Doug from the future here. I remember it so you don't have to, or whatever. As you're probably aware, Saw 10 came out a year ago now, in fact. Editing videos takes time, who knew? I really enjoyed Saw 10. There were lots of new elements as well as great visual callbacks to the original series. I have my complaints about it, but I'm going to stay on topic with the timeline focus of this video and just talk about that. There's not too much to parse with the dates. It all takes place in that bit that I said, like right in the middle of the timeline. There's not any kind of big jumps into the future or flashbacks into the past. It does confirm actually that the Easton conversation did happen in the time I said it did, so I am happy that my obsessing over what makeup keyboard that was amounted to something, at least. There are some small signifiers at the time, like John has a Gmail account, which means it has to take place after April 2004, which is when Gmail came out, but that doesn't really do much for us because we knew that it had to take place after October 2004 anyway, since that's when the bathroom game was. He does also appear to be using Windows 2000, even though Windows XP would have been out at this time, so he should have updated, but then again, he's old. However, he does watch a video at one point and it looks like it should be on YouTube, but it's not. It's just on a website that looks like old YouTube, but it's just called Video Broadcast. Perhaps this is to show that it took place before YouTube launch, that is to say before February 2005, but also it could just be a logo issue. He is also using web search instead of Google, so But then again, he's old. I am a little confused as to why John keeps showing his face to the victims straight out the gate. Neither he nor Amanda were known as Jigsaw killers at this point, so it seems strange that he's ignoring such an important part of his style. Like, he has Billy with him. Amanda flew him over to Mexico. I did think for the first like 40 minutes of this movie that they were going to set up a plot line where his cancer gets cured and then he faked his death in Saw 3, which would be insane, but it would be a decent explanation as to why his body had stubble that he didn't have when he died. I mean, obviously this is a different person, right? It's definitely not John. Identical twin brother, maybe? Just a suggestion. I have so many more thoughts about this and also more timeline stuff, but this video is long enough as it is. So I'm going to be streaming a playthrough of the Saw video game on this YouTube channel. So come join me and hurl questions at me and debate me on my timeline and listen to me talk about Saw 10 and all of the things that I cut out of this video to make it the snappy, bite-sized length it is. A quick thank you to my friend Cress, who's the one who gave me the idea to try to figure out this timeline chronologically. I have rewritten and re-recorded this so many times. This is what I look like when I first started recording video for this. So if you don't like the video, I'll kill you. Goodbye.